हेलो सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल माफी है कि पिछले हफ्ते की थोड़ी सी हाजिरी नहीं लगा पाए हम बिकॉज छुट्टी पे चले गए थे यार। एक हफ्ते का ब्रेक तो बनता है अपने को भी। हम कौन सा बंधुआ मजदूर, तुम कौन सा पैसे दे दो हमें सुनने के लिए, है फ्री में सुन लो, तो हमने ब्रेक ले लिया। दैट्स बेसिकली व्हाट वी डिड। नाउ दिस वीक वी आर बैक एंड अर्चित आज शादी में अपनी शादी नहीं कर रहे, किसी और की शादी करा रहे। ये उनका पार्ट टाइम जॉब है। ही enjoys other people's wedding, or if you are interested, आप hashtag when Archit is getting married आप ये डाल करके अर्चित से पूछ सकते हो। I don't have any problem. All right, on that we have covered a lot of different kinds of food, a lot of different kinds of cuisine, ingredients and whatnot. We talked about Sindhi cuisine, we talked about Maharashtrian cuisine, we talked about Pahari cuisine, we talked about, I don't know what not we have talked about. Bengali cuisine, that's one, because we did like a bunch of episodes on Bengali cuisine to understand it. But what we, I think, missed was to talk about Gujarati cuisine. Now, how can we miss Guju cuisine? Like the world, this is my personal opinion, and I am right, is that the world is being run by two communities, the Gujus and the Biharis. There's nobody else, and also Sikhs. But that's mostly Canada. But then who knows? But the Gujus and Biharis and Sikhs, let's go with that, are all over the world, right? So today we have got Urvashi Roe. Urvashi Roe is an author. She's come up with a book called Biting last year. She is a baker. She was a cook. She loves to eat. She finds cooking very therapeutic, by the way. And it's beautiful because everybody who loves cooking finds it very interesting and therapeutic. She was on BBC's Great British Bake Off show. She's also a vegetarian. She has inspired so many vegetarian communities around. Also, she works with KPMG as a global sales director global sales enablement. And basically, she said, I get shit done. Big name. And then, so yeah. So if you want to discuss with her about food, yes, she's the person. If you're unemployed, please go bombard her LinkedIn. मैडम नौकरी दो, मैडम नौकरी दो, बहुत बहुत ज्यादा पैसे की जरूरत है बिकॉज इन्फ्लेशन आ रही है। ठीक है, तो खैर ऑन दैट वेलकम उर्वशी to our lovely Naan Curry podcast. And are you ready to get grilled?
Hi, Sadaf. Yes, I'm ready. Thank you for such a fantastic introduction. And thank you for having me on your podcast.
Thank you. It's so beautiful. How was the weather in London? Because you're joining us from London.
I am. I'm joining you from my daughter's bedroom. Don't tell her. She doesn't like it when I sit in her room. It's a beautiful sunny morning, actually. It's beautiful blue skies. The birds are singing, and I'm just looking out at my garden.
Lovely. This will only go on YouTube with video. So yeah, how will she know? How will she know this is her room? There's very little chance that she would get to know that this is her own room. But yeah, I was on a TV show, MasterChef, in 2016. And you were on the TV show where we discussed about the Great British Bake Off. So yeah, tell me more about it. Because see, that's a question that everybody me, and I'm sure 10,000 people have, and I am going to be 10,001st person. So yeah, how was it to be on the show in 2011?
So I think it was probably one of the scariest things that I've ever done, one of the most stressful things I've ever done, but it was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. It was a bit of a lastminute.com kind of thing, right? So I turned 40 and we were just, drinking on a Friday night, me and my husband. And I was like, I'm not going to be this boring, middle-aged kind of person. I'm going to keep doing some cool things. And so I'm going to make a list of all these things that I've never done. And so we started making this list. And we put on there, do TV, never done that. Yay, let's do that. So then the next day, I was just sitting in bed, scrolling for recipes. And I came across Paul Hollywood's website. And on the website, there was this application for Great British Bake Off. And I was like, oh, yay, TV, I can apply for this. Yay, it's on my list. So I applied on the Sunday. It was like this really, really long form. I filled it in, I sent it off. And then on the Monday, they called me back and I had an interview. And then they said, hey, we'd like you to come and, cook some stuff for us and bring one sweet thing, one savory thing. So I was like, yeah, okay, I can do that. That sounds great. So off I went to the audition and I made pavlova as my sweet thing. And I made bread rolls, focaccia, chili and rosemary focaccia for my savory thing. And I turned up and I didn't really expect to see Paul and Mary. And they were there. And I was like, oh my God, it's really you. Like I thought I was going to be meeting, your colleagues or something. But it was really them. And they were just both so, so nice. So I got through that round. And then they asked me to come back. And we did the kind of technical challenge kind of round. And then pretty much about 2 weeks later, they confirmed that I was on the show. And I was like, oh, okay. Because I'm a really thoughtful person. Like I take quite a long time to think through doing stuff. So this whole spontaneity around the Great British Bake Off was just really not me. And I know that there are people who applied and then their process took a lot longer, a year, I think, in some cases. But for me, it was like boom, 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 boom. Okay. So looking back, I think if it had taken longer, I do wonder whether or not I would have done it. But because it was so quick, I was like, oh, yeah, I can do that. Oh, yeah, okay, I can do that. And then all of a sudden, I'm part of the final 12, list of contestants. So it was awesome.
It's like destiny. You were supposed to be there.
Yeah, maybe.
But I'm curious. I'll come to the my social research. Some may call it stalking as well, but I would like to call it social research. Tells me you were born in Tanzania. So we'll come to that in a bit. But when you filled up the form for the show, right? And the sweet and savory, which you mentioned, you made bread roll and pavlova. Was that the first thing that you thought of? Or I'm assuming, like, for example, when I was on the show, I'm like, my audition, and I'm thinking that what should I cook? Which represents me, right? Is it I'm going to be making Indian cuisine? Or like, because I grew up in Bihar, Jharkhand, so should I be cooking Bihar or Jharkhand food? Or I was in Delhi, so should I be cooking something Delhi? Should I be cooking something international? What should I? So like a good 1 week, I was just confused. What am I going to cook? And ended up cooking an Indonesian, or actually Malaysian satay chicken. So that I made, and then with peanut butter sauce, which also made it like before that I never made peanut butter at my home, but this time I made peanut butter at home and then mixed it up, made some sauce and all that. But that was an international quote unquote, right? It's still Asian community in general. But it took me a week. How did you come to think about pavlova and not something which is stereotypical Gujarati?
I just wanted to take something that I really like to eat, right? So we love pavlova in this house. We switched from having birthday cakes to having pavlova for my eldest daughter, when she was about 12, 13 years old. So we love pavlova. And I think that I didn't really think, should I make something that represents my culture? I just wanted to make something that I enjoyed eating, that would come across in my interview, that, I love eating this. I literally could eat this whole thing in front of you right now. So I made a chocolate pavlova, followed the Queen Nigella's recipe for chocolate pavlova. And actually, pavlova is quite difficult to make because you want, like a crisp outside, but then you want the fluffy marshmallowy inside. And then there's the logistics of taking it to the audition, because I had to make the pavlova and then I did the cream separately. And then I did, fresh raspberries, picking out the bits that were really, perfect raspberries. And then I had just some honey and some, I think it was toasted pistachios or something over the top. So I remember parking my car and like carrying this medley of stuff to make sure that it, my pavlova didn't break, but it broke just artistically while I put the cream on and stuff. So yeah, I think that was my motivation. I wanted to make something that I really like to eat. And then on the savory, I love bread, absolutely love bread. So I made like a little basket of rolls, and that I did bring in a little bit of spice. So I think one of them was cumin spiced white bread rolls. And then I did the rosemary and chili focaccia. And the thinking behind that one was I'm not good at baking bread. Well, at the time I wasn't good at baking bread. My husband was really more the bread baker in the house. So I thought, well, if I can pass the audition with something I'm not great at, then that's a good thing, right? So
Yeah.
I remember sitting, in front of Paul and Mary, and she tasted the pavlova, and she said, "Oh, aren't you a clever girl?" And I was like, "Thank you." And then Paul Hollywood, gives me the kind of Paul stare, and then he
Mean mug
breaks
face.
open, yeah, and he
Yeah.
breaks open the focaccia, and he's like, "Do you know what that is?" And I was like, "It's focaccia with chili and rosemary." He's like, "That's genius. That's beautiful." And I was like, "Oh my God, I actually like it." Like, so yeah, I guess that was the motivation, and I did okay.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, I think two things which instantly connect both of us is that I love breads and I love pavlova. There was this particular time period in my life where there was one coffee shop, well, a restaurant. The reason I'm calling it coffee shop because I would go there only for coffee, but it was a Pondicherry inspired food that they were serving, and very close to my home, like 25 minutes, not even that far. So I will find every Saturday or every Sunday, mostly weekends, let's say, I would sort of park myself there, one corner seat next to the window. I will order a cup of coffee, and they had really beautiful coffee and pavlova. And that pavlova, so they had it as outsourced basically, and the baker was also, I mean, she would always come, but she was not the full time baker for the restaurant. So she would bake these at her home, and she used to make one of the best pavlovas, if not the best. And the only thing I'll pick up the coffee and pavlova. It was just beautiful. And if I go there, there's no pavlova. She would feel bad for me. She like, Sadaf, today we don't have pavlova. I'm like, oh my god, oh, what would I done now pair my coffee with? So she would say, regular people club it with cake or a croissant. So I'm like, yeah, sure. So days when there's no pavlova, then I would switch to a tea cake or a croissant.
What's your favorite
Gone.
flavor of the pavlova?
Very simple, basic, just cream and strawberry, and that's about it. I don't want too much of because see, I think pavlova itself, the base itself has so much of flavor, right? It always reminds me of this, Indian batasha. I'm sure you must have had the batasha.
No.
So it's really sugar candy basically, which you usually give during the festivals, mostly popular during Diwali, which is like a sugar drop candy. That's a better word to sort of give it. Like you boil sugar and then you
Mhm.
add a little bit of baking soda in it, and it gives that honeycomb texture, right?
Okay.
And then it just winds round beautiful like a coin basically. It gives me that same pavlova-ish texture. Of course, pavlova is much better. So yeah, that's why I like pavlova. But yeah, it's so beautiful. So yeah, so before were you with KPMG in 2011 as well, or you were, because you said you turned 40 and then you want to do all crazy things? So the reason of asking you this question is like, did you take like a work break or something, or how did that
Um,
go?
yeah, so no, I actually wasn't with KPMG at the time. I was working somewhere else. And part of the process is they give you all the dates and you
Mhm.
have to commit to taking the dates. So usually the filming starts on Friday. So it wasn't too difficult really. I just took, the Fridays off work.
Okay.
And that was that really. But no, I wasn't working at KPMG. I was working somewhere else, and they came to film at my place of work. And I think my colleagues quite enjoyed it because I used to bring testers of what I was going to cook
Yeah,
to work,
yeah.
which I've always done, to be honest. I've always taken cakes to work or brownies to work, just when it's people's birthdays and stuff. I like doing things like that. So yeah, it wasn't complicated. I think it was just hard because it was such an intense weekend. We would need to turn up. I think it was about 6 o'clock on a Friday, or sometimes maybe it was even Thursday evening. I don't remember.
Okay.
And they take everything off you. I don't know if you had the same in MasterChef, but you have to hand over your phone, your keys, your wallet, your suitcase, your life, like everything. They just lock it up, and you just enter this bubble of filming for the weekend. And in my series, which was the second series, we filmed in Valentine's Park in Ilford. So I was quite lucky because it was only 20 minutes from home. And
Okay.
at that time, it wasn't so popular. So, you know, it was in a public park and there were people walking around. So it was quite nice because on Saturday or Sunday, my husband would bring the girls and they'd just stand at the edge of the tent and, you know, say, hi, mommy. And during the breaks, I got a chance to see them. So I think I was luckier than others who lived much further away, and their families, they weren't able to connect with their families. But, you know, they play on that because you get to the end of the weekend and you've had like a really tough few days of filming, and they leave the difficult questions right until that Sunday evening when you've missed your family and you haven't seen them, and they're like, okay, so are you missing your family? I'm like, yes. They get really emotional because you're so tired.
Yeah. No, so you had only weekend shootings, not the whole season.
No,
Oh,
we didn't
wonderful.
have the whole week. Yeah.
Oh no, for us, or I think for all the master chefs, even the one that's happening right now in India, assumption is that across the globe, that's what they do. Is you go in, so it's a bubble, yes, but you will have your phone not during the shoot, but you live with them. While they're shooting, they will ask you to sort of not to bring their phone or anything, because you don't want to take your phone out and then know the secrets of or just cheat basically. So they would take the phones off from you. So that's the only thing. But yeah, that's wonderful. Talking about food and open space, you had something called community cafe. I don't know what a community cafe means. And
Okay.
when you had it, when was it? Post, pre, and all that. What was it about?
Yeah, so I decided to take a break from work to just, I've worked since my girls were babies, about 6 months old. I went back to work, and they were settling into senior schools. So I decided to take some time out. And frankly, I got a bit bored. So after a couple of years of just being mummy, I got a little bit bored, and that's when I really started to do the freelance writing, and I did some food styling as well, and photography and commissions for different brands. And then I was reading my local paper one day, and I saw this advertisement for the cafe in my local library coming up for tender. And I was like, okay, this is going to need a little bit of brain power. I might just do this. I might give it a go and see. It was an interesting business concept because it was kind of school hours, right? So library opens at 9, it closes at 5 most days, and you would not be allowed to open the cafe outside of these hours. So I thought, okay, well, this isn't going to get crazy, because I've had businesses before. I used to have 2 flower shops when my girls were little, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. I really miss my flower shops, but you know, having a business with little kids is all consuming, and frankly, I don't know what I was thinking when we did it. But anyway, so I tendered for this cafe, and it was the most complex process, as it is with local councils over here. Anything to do with the local council is deeply complex. And I had to fill in a form and submit photos and this and that. Anyway, I went to the opening of the cafe, where you could go and look around and, you know, see what everything was like. And I remember they had Starbucks, Costa, Nero, Peyton and Byrne, all of those, you know, very typical high street chains. And I came home and I said to my husband, oh, well, that was, you know, good practice for getting back into the workplace, because I'm never going to get this. And about 3 weeks later, I was on I was doing my Leith's food styling course in the evening, and we were in the kitchen. And I remember this really vividly. There was about 12 of us in the kitchen, and we were styling something, and I just, you know, I'd finished, so I was just scrolling through my emails, and I saw the email from the council, and I was just like, ah, and I just screamed, and everyone turned and looked at me as if something was wrong. I cut myself or something. And I was like, oh my God, I got the cafe. I got this cafe. I got the tender. It was me that they picked. And the reason that they picked me was because everything I put in the cafe had this sense of community, because what I wanted to do was build a community vibe, which I think was missing in my area. You know, so I've lived in this area for the last, I don't know, 25 years or so. And it's quite difficult to meet people, and particularly when you're, you know, like a young mom and you just had a kid. I used to go to the library, and it was like a lifeline, because I used to meet people who were going through the same shit as I was. And there was nowhere for us to then go for a cup of tea and coffee and a chat that was safe to have with our kids. And you know, we felt welcomed, because you know, you turn up with a pushchair in Starbucks and there's 5 or 6 of you, everyone looks and goes, oh fuck, like, sorry, because there's this, you know, screaming kids coming in. So anyway, I wanted to build this community space where anybody who from any generation felt that it was okay to come and chill for a cup of tea or for a meal or for whatever. I suppose, you know, just to bring a little bit of that dynamic to Enfield. So that was point number 1. Point number 2 was, we did not at the time have any decent coffee here in the area where I live. So I was like, I'm going to have shit hot coffee. I'm going to make the best coffee in Enfield. And, you know, it's going to be really different. And I'm going to try and educate people as to what coffee is. I mean, I love Starbucks. There's a time and place for Starbucks, but it is expensive. It is not coffee. Usually people just press a button and it comes out into this cup and it's scalding hot, and, you know, people drink that shit. So that was point number 2. And then point number 3 was, I wanted to employ local and source local. So we are so blessed in the area where I live. I have a farm, which I used to volunteer at. And, you know, they produce all sorts of different vegetables. They have an orchard there. And again, we used to go and volunteer on the orchard when my girls were little. And I wanted to buy from them. I wanted to buy British cheeses. I wanted to buy British charcuterie. I wanted to kind of really make sure that it was sourced local first. If I couldn't get it, then it was UK. Then if I couldn't get it, then it was EU. And there were a few exceptions, you know, when we had specials like coconut milk, for example. It's never going to be British sourced. But primarily, I tried to source all the drinks, everything to be British. So we didn't really have anything that I couldn't tell a story about, because I have, you know, here's the smoked salmon that I buy, and this is the guy that I buy it from. Here's a picture of him. And we used to have like a picture of him and his business. And then the guy that we used to buy cheese from, who was just up the road. So that's really what I mean by community, I suppose. And that ethos was really important to me. And it was hard to find people to come and work with us who believed in that ethos as well. You know, I didn't want somebody who just wanted a job. I wanted somebody who wanted a job and also was passionate about doing what I'm doing. So yeah, I set that up, and it was really hard. I'd never run a food business before. My husband had. He's had a sushi factory, and he's worked for like import-export companies, and he's got all that background and stuff. So that was really helpful, because he knew about all of the legal shit, right? You know, you got to do this qualification, you got to do this safety hygiene, la la la. So that was, you know, quite a good partnership. And the first time really that I worked properly with my husband, but it was mostly my kind of, you know, little project. And what I love is that now I sometimes am at a food festival that the farm runs. We have them, you know, like monthly here. And I'll see this little kid coming up to me, and they're like, cafe lady, hi. And they still remember. And I love it, because they're all my cafe babies. They're all the mums that used to come into the cafe for maternity leave. And then they'd have their babies, and then they'd come with their babies. And then as their babies grew older and started school, and I still see them, and I love it. I love the fact that they still remember who I am. I love the fact that they remember that they had baby chinos in my cafe. And, you know, we used to make kids food that looked like butterflies or caterpillars, so that it was a little bit interesting. We used to brand it as, you know, do you want your sandwiches with bogies on the side? And they, bogies? Like, yeah, everybody eats bogies. What are bogies? Well, here, look, and I'm going to eat it. And it was just a grape, right? But all mushed up and mushy and squishy. And they loved it. And they used to eat it. And they used to bring their plate back to me and say, cafe lady, can I have my sticker now? And we used to give them a sticker. So that was the kids. And then there was the older generation too, because, you know, the library is a place of refuge for so many people. And what I loved is I used to start to get some of the older generation coming in, and they'd come in and they'd say, I want a cappuccino. And I'm like, okay, I know that you don't really want a cappuccino, because I know that that upsets your stomach when you have so much milk. So shall I make you a flat white, maybe with just one shot of coffee, so it's a little bit lighter? So we used to kind of, you know, really get to know who was coming in, and
Yeah.
I remember one time there was a lady who came in and she had some bad news and she just broke down, and my barista walked her home with her shopping, and she came back in the next day and she made us some biscuits, and they were the
Wow.
best biscuits, because elderly people just have this knack of making the best food. And it was
Yeah.
just so lovely that we were able to do something like that and help. And we used to run events, hosting different mum businesses, because there's a lot of people around here who are mums. They've taken time out of full-time work, but they do stuff from home. Maybe they crochet, or maybe they make art, or maybe they sell kids books or whatever. So we used to basically invite them to come and have their stall outside the cafe on a Saturday. So that, I hope, gives you a bit of a sense of what I mean when I say community cafe.
Community kitchen, correct. But and this was pre or post your Bake Off, your show?
This is after. Yeah.
After show. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm curious because you talked about a bunch of things, right? And I'm because while we are having this conversation, I can see that passion coming already out for food, right? And then because you have two different hats to wear, there's a food person and then there is the corporate person. But if you talk about the food itself, what does the food really, when you've mentioned on so many online journals, right, that food is therapeutic for you, but what does that food mean to you, like a food value? What would be your food funda or food fundamentals? Like, I cannot, this is my go-to thing, or uh, this is why I cook personally. What would be your vision or fundamental?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yes, I love eating food, but it wasn't always this way, right? And yes, I love cooking, but it wasn't always this way. And actually, I learned to cook like many Gujarati or even, Indian families. I was about 8, 9 years old when my mum taught me how to cook proper dal, bhat, shak, rotli. And the reason that she taught me how to cook was twofold. One, she had to go back to visit her father, who wasn't very well, in Tanzania. And second, through my teenage years, it was always drummed into me that, you need to be able to cook so that you can get a good husband. Because when the husband's family come to meet you for the first time, your rotli must be fuleli. Because if they're not fuleli, then nobody's going to want to marry you. And if your food doesn't taste nice, then the mother-in-law is going to be mean to you. That was like not a nice way to learn how to cook, right? It was like, well, fuck that. I don't want to learn how to cook because I don't want to get married. So I just really hated my mother to, hate is a very strong word, but I did at the time. I was this horrible teenager and I was like, I don't want to learn how to cook. I did my O-levels, which was at age 16. And my friends all went off to Greece on holiday and I had to learn how to cook and I hated it. And she taught me how to cook one dish every day. And, I was from that generation where parents did give you a clip around the ear hole if you did something wrong, or just like, a little slap here and there. And I remember if my rotli weren't round, I used to get a little slap on the hand, or if my rotli burned or something. So she was very strict about teaching us how to cook. So I did not have a love of food. My relationship with food was functional. Yes, I loved eating foods that my mother made and my aunties made, my ba made, but it was just food. It's what we did to exist. So I don't think that it was really until I went to university that I appreciated that education, that comprehensive education, because I went to university in London, Germany, France, and then back to London for my degree. I did French, German law and economics at uni. And I was in Germany and I'd never lived by myself before. And I was in this foreign country. I couldn't find any spices. I couldn't find the food that made me feel at home. That's where, by the way, I became obsessed with bread. I used to go to the bakeries in the morning, just sit there and just inhale the smell to make me feel better when I felt sad. But yeah, I kind of, that's really when I started to appreciate it. And when I went home, I would bring the spices back with me. I'd bring dal back, I'd bring basmati rice back, I'd bring jora and all of those kinds of things. I bought myself a little pressure cooker to have at university. So that was really when I started to develop that appreciation for food. And I think that has always stuck. I have always been really grateful for the opportunity to look into a cupboard, see what there is, and make something. And I think that that is a fundamental skill that everybody should have, boy, girl, regardless of age. My father included. My father is very typically Gujarati husband. My mother cooks for him and he eats it. He doesn't know how to cook anything. He makes chai in the morning. That's about it. Maybe he could make an omelette, if you pushed him to. But I think that's really shit. I think everybody should be able to cook for themselves and feed themselves. So I feel very privileged that I had that grounding. And I also feel very privileged that I met my husband, who started life after university as a chef. And he taught me the bits that were missing, if you like. So I knew how to cook Indian food, but I didn't know how to make pasta or even some of those Western basics. Even though I'd eaten them, I didn't really know how to cook them. So when we lived together in Japan, oh, hang on a minute. We didn't live together in Japan. We lived in the same building in Japan. And he taught me how to cook all of these different things. And that's really where I started to learn about flavor and experiment with flavor and appreciate the different cuisines that there are and how you can play with them and add different flavors to something to make it a little bit different. So let me give you an example. When I lived in Japan, we used to, have those little sushi maki rolls. So you'd have the paper nori and then you'd have the sushi rice and then just cucumber in the middle. Yeah. I used to really like putting jero in there with some like lasani chutney and then rolling it up. And that was like what made that taste great for me. And it's nothing wrong with it. I'm not bastardizing somebody else's food. I'm just personalizing it because I really like the taste of it. So yeah, and I think that if you don't know how to cook, then that ability to experiment is harder. I'm not saying it's not there, it's just harder, because if you have this fundamental understanding of flavor, then you know how you can play with it and it might taste good, right? So I think for me, food is substance that feeds you and nurtures you, but it has all, so many different meanings and memories. I think food is also nostalgia. To this day, when I drink a Corona and have a plate of very simple nachos and salsa, it takes me back to one of the first dates that I had with my husband in Japan, where we used to meet in this little Mexican bar. And I love that food has that sense of the ability to do that, right? Tagine, we were traveling in Morocco and we'd just come out of this really huge sandstorm, and we arrived on the other side of the sandstorm and there was just a few huts and my daughters were so hungry. Honestly, they could have eaten anything. So we stopped at one of these huts and the guy was making this potato tagine with saffron and he had 3 left and we bought them all and we sat down on the floor in the side of the road in the dirt and we just ate this tagine. I cannot tell you how flavorful that was. It was just potatoes, olives, saffron, and bread. And I can still taste it and I salivate every time I have that memory. So, food has this ability to transport you to places. It has the ability to communicate. You can communicate with people through food. And I think fundamentally, how amazing is it that you have the gift of somebody coming to visit you and you make something for them and you feed them and they appreciate that. That is such a basic, fundamental gift of happiness. I love it. And it's taken me a long time, I think, to appreciate that, from the hatred of learning to cook to where I am today.
From hatred to appreciation. Wonderful. So before we slip into our break, a good food for thought for the audience, who are people who are listening to us, is what you mentioned, right? Whether cooking is a gender-based skill. So that's for the audience, and very nicely put over, she, that food transports or sort of transpires, transforms, or sends you this meta or some worse like Marvel or DC Comics. Wonderful. And when we come back from our break, of course, we are going to explore a lot more on Guju food. What is Gujarati food and what especially Gujarati food means to Urvashi. So let's take a break and come back.
Hello, hello. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. We are back with the second season of How to Citizen, hosted by Meghnad and Shreyas. The first episode of second season drops on February 26th. And guess who is our guest? Omar Abdullah, former Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. So catch the episode now on the All About Now feed on IVM, YouTube and all streaming platforms. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam talks to co-founder of Multiple, Vikas Jain, on a new strategy, Save Now, Buy Later, and how one can implement it in their daily life. On a niche thing, Anish talks to Priya Mirza, historian and lecturer, about the 5 most important things one should know about the Indian Constitution. On Pulyabazi, Khyati, Saurabh and Pranay talk about how China has aced the game of innovation to win the technology race. And on Just a Filmy Game Show, Antariksh quizzes comedians Mohammad Hussain and Sejal Bhatt with some filmy questions. New episodes are out on the IVM Pop feed. Once again, don't forget to visit our merch store on the ivmpodcast.com website. We have some exciting stuff for you. Follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. If you like our shows, spread the word. Tell your friends and don't forget to rate and review them wherever you're listening to them. You'll also find all our shows on youtube.com/IVM Podcasts. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week, Yono SBI, Capgemini, and HDFC Mutual Fund. Thank you for making this possible.
And we are back. I'm assuming people have grabbed their water bottle or whatever they're doing. Or smart people like me have skipped that advertisement already. And now we're here. All right. So, Urvashi, fantastic so far. I really am in sort of, there's so much of passion that I'm already getting from you about the food. And it's just inspiring. Tell me one thing. What is, and for people who live under a rock, who don't know what Gujarati food is like, because a stereotypical Gujarati food means it is sweet, from roti to dal, or everything in between. Everything is sweet. So, how would you tell the ignorance that what is Gujarati food?
I think that's really funny. So like, I don't know if that's an India thing, because I've never grown up with super sweet food. Like I was born in Tanzania, so maybe there's like the whole East African influence thing there. But yeah, I think that it is commonly understood that Gujarati people have a sweet tooth, and
Yeah.
that's good. We can talk about that in a second. But I think for me, there are so many different cuisines in India, and we are so blessed that we have that richness across the country. But I do think, and you might disagree with me, but I do think that Gujarati food is some of the simplest, maybe because it's mostly vegetarian. I know we have some big Muslim communities in Gujarat as well who do eat meat, but I think that because it's mostly vegetarian, you can actually just use very, very simple spices to make shak, right? Or dar. So a tarka dar in the north of India to dar that my mum taught me how to make, I think is very, very different. And I think that it's because of the variation of spices. So at its very basic form, I suppose Gujarati food starts with vagar, right? So mustard seeds, cumin seeds is what we use in vagar. Sure, you can add cassia bark, cardamom, star anise, all of those, richer spices, cloves on top of it if you wanted to. But fundamentally, you could make shak with just mustard seeds and cumin seeds. And then in terms of other spices, well, there's hardar, turmeric, right? And chili powder, ground cumin, ground coriander. If you just have those things and salt, then you can make a very basic shak. And that's really what I put in my book, is that you don't need to be scared of Indian food, because actually Gujarati food can make it really, really simple. And I think that's quite important, because of folks who don't know Indian food or have never grown up with Indian food have this perception that it's super complex, and it can be. I've seen recipes for dar where you've got like 15, 16 different spices, and some are seeds and some are powders, and some you have to go all the way across London to search, and there's a lot of recipe books with recipes like that. So I guess for me, Gujarati food is the simplest of all, because you can kind of make something really tasty. So yeah, I think so Gujarati food is vegetarian. Gujarati food is I think relatively simple to make. And there's a pattern with Gujarati food, you know, it's dal, bhat, shak, rotli. That's what I grew up with every single day. And on the side, as part of my thali, then we would have lasani chutney, or we would have, you know, gajar no sambaro. And then we would have like a little bowl of ras, or montar, or penda, or barfi, or whatever the sweet thing was that my mum had made that weekend. So for me, it's kind of also all inclusive of flavors, a little bit like Thai food, you know, like how the Thai have the sweet, sour. I think we have the same thing, because you have your shaks, then you have your rotli, you have your rice, then you have your sweet stuff, and then you have your sambar, which can be khattu, then maybe you have your limbu nuatan, which also can be khattu, right? So I think it's also all encompassing in that way. And it comes back to being something that is nourishing on a plate without actually realizing it. So why do you always have dal? Well, that's the only source of protein that my mum knew how to cook. We didn't have tofu, we didn't have paneer when I was growing up. Beans, lentils, mug, you know, all that kind of stuff was the main source of protein for us. Yogurt, same source of protein. The vegetables that we had, there was always one starchy vegetable, like, you know, potatoes or something, and then there was also a leafy vegetable like spinach or peas or green beans. So I think you also have that nutritional variety in Gujarati food.
I think, I mean, not many people knew about this, but because we're talking about Gujarati food, so I want to tell you, the first time I ever felt what a foodgasm is like was when I was in Ahmedabad. In Ahmedabad, there's a place. Have you been to? I'm sure you must have been to Ahmedabad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in Ahmedabad, there's a place, there's a thali restaurant, and a thali food in Gujarat or in Gujarati space is phenomenal. So when I was in Ahmedabad, I went to this particular restaurant. That's one of my favorite restaurants in Ahmedabad. It's called Sasuma, Sasuji, something like that. But there's Sasu for sure. There is mother-in-law.
There's
right?
always a sasu.
There's always Sasu. So I go there, and this is an unlimited thali food, right? However, I don't do justice to any of these unlimited food places, because my appetite is really small. So I would taste everything and then I'm done. People get surprised often. So I was there. This was, I think, 2014 or something. We eat at Sasuma. The regular rotla, dal, everything, every Gujarati delicacy that I could think of was on the plate. We had it. 3 or 4 of us were there, and we come back, and I kid you not, all of us were like almost like not dead tired, but I mean, for the lack of better word, I'm going to use the word dead tired, because there was no other feeling, right? You just like the load just went off your shoulder. And when we reached home, all 4 of us, wherever we were sitting, and I'm not even exaggerating, wherever we were sitting, we were working on the laptop. We reached home by 10 or something. And then we had some work pending, and we started working for like an hour. And all of us, there was one person sitting on the sofa and just lied down and passed through. A friend of mine, he slept in a very funny position. So his body was on the ground, his leg was on the sofa. I was sitting in the room, and then my laptop was on, and I slept that way. So all of us, this was the foodgasm, and I could never forget that entire like a sense of happiness. You just felt so good after eating Gujarati cuisine. But that's Ahmedabad, right? That's the heart of Gujarat, or one of the hearts of Gujarat. But how was it? Because you grew up in Tanzania, as you mentioned. So your Gujarati food perhaps was a little different. Had the effect of Tanzanian cuisine. Then you moved to UK, and now you live there. So then maybe there's some update there. And then also, how was it like when we think about Indian cuisine? And it's a sad stage to an extent. It's now breaking that the Indian cuisine equals to North Indian cuisine mostly, or if it's South, then it's just idli, sambar, and dosa. but it's breaking. The people are breaking that stereotype. So how do you find Gujarati food easily in UK as well at restaurants or like Farsan? And from Farsan will come to, of course, your Katak Patak in a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So not easily, I would say, right? So in England, you have, the hotspots where immigrants have settled. And a lot of my family live in Leicester, which is a very Gujarati, a lot of Gujaratis live in Leicester. There are Gujaratis in other parts of the UK, but I would say Leicester, like a little bit of a population in Bristol, and then London. And within London, there is a lot of Gujaratis near Wembley. So when I first came to England, we stayed with my fuwa in Tooting, which is South London. And now I don't think there's any Gujarati places in South London. I don't know. There's probably loads of people who are going to tweet and go, yeah, there's this great Gujarati place in South London. I've never found one, but there are Gujaratis in South London. But yeah, so my parents decided to settle in Wembley. And I think one of the reasons they decided to settle in Wembley, so we went from Tooting, then we went to Southall, which is, very, very Punjabi at the time, which, again, going back to food memories, jalebi in Southall, my most favorite sweet thing to eat. But yeah, so they settled in Wembley because there was a big concentration of Gujarati folks here. And there was a lot of family members who settled in Wembley. And it was, there's a road called Ealing Road in Wembley, which is just little Rajkot, I think, or little Ahmedabad. It's got the pan seller, it's got the guy selling corn, it's got the sari shops, and now there's loads of different varieties of restaurants. But there used to be only Gujarati cooking on there. So I don't think it's that that easy to find Gujarati food. And what I find annoying, and I want to, I guess, change the narrative on, is that word curry, which I know is this whole different podcast you could have, right, on that word alone. But I've been really specific in my book to talk about shak, right? Yeah. Because in Gujarat, we say shak. And some people say sak, depending on which part of Gujarat you're from. Like my friend Kavita says sak, which is weird. But anyway, I say shak. And, in my book, I've kind of put that you've got aku shak, whole shak, you've got barelu shak, stuffed shak, or you've just got shak, right? You can pretty much make shak from everything, except celeriac and swede. And can I just put this out there? Because my husband wants me to make shak from swede. And I'm like, dude, sweet shak, that just sounds wrong. I don't know why. Like, it just sounds wrong. He's like, no, you should make it. I'm like, okay, I've written a book now. It's got all of my secrets. You can make the shak out of sweet.
It's interesting. For many people, sweet dal is also off-putting. Just saying.
I'm not a sweet fan. Sorry.
Sweet dal. But you bake. How do you bake without like sweet? We'll come to that as well. That's a big thing. Big revelation.
So, to your question, it wasn't easy to find Gujarati food. I think now it is much easier, particularly because there are so many caterers now. When I got married, to try and find proper Gujarati caterers 26 years ago was impossible. So I had like my masis, my kakis, my face, everybody in the kitchen making food for the whole week. And then we supplemented it with, the caterer. But yeah, now it's really easy to find Gujarati catering. But if you want proper Gujarati food, then you have to go to the hotspots. You need to go to Leicester. You need to go to Wembley.
Okay. Rishi Bhai, su thayu. We need to complain to Rishi Bhai. We need to talk to Rishi Bhai. Rishi Bhai, you and I need to have this conversation. We need more Gujarati food in all of UK, not just in Wembley. But yeah, so but is it? Do you have? You mentioned about the caterers, but do you have like a restaurant, like how you have like a North Indian specific restaurants all over UK, right? But do you have like a Gujarati only or the Guju snack? Like a store.
Yeah, the pockets of them. So like what comes to mind, right? So there's a place called Gujarati Rasoi that used to be in Islington, but I think now they have a store and they do mail order food. There's another place called Prasad, which actually is in Bradford, I think, and their food is Gujarati. So I think there are Gujarati restaurants, but I don't think that they do a very good job of branding themselves as Gujarati restaurants. It's like, people who I know have been there, it's like, oh yeah, I went, but I didn't realize that that was Gujarati food. So I think that we have a long way to go before Gujarati food is differentiated here in the UK, that somebody can look at a shack, a range of dishes and go, yeah, that's definitely Gujarati. I can taste it.
Right. So that's still a little hazy. Is that correct?
I think it's like, okay, so the test, I suppose, is where can I go to eat undiyu, like classic Gujarati dish, undiyu.
Yes.
Where can I go to eat this? Not very many places, right?
Yeah,
and would somebody like if you put a dishes in front of people would know dar. Yes, I would hope. Even though they call it red lentil dal most of the time, but they would know dar. They would know chana masala. They would know, some of those common dishes. But if I put undiyu in front of them, would they know that undiyu, that's what it was, and it had ringa in it, and it was made in this way, and actually it's from this region in India? No, I don't think so.
It's interesting about undiyu because it's one of the most popular food in Gujarat space. I think every Gujarati I have spoken to, they love undiyu. I know people who actually go to Gujarat, different parts, from Surat to Ahmedabad to whatever, and bring back the vegetables just to make undiyu, because all of them, while most of them say the same thing, that you don't get the same kind of vegetables that you get in Gujarat to add into your undiyu sabzi, which is interesting. And I'm like, in this modern globalized world, when you're living in Delhi, you're not able to find any of those vegetables. They're like, no, you still have to. So I know people who will bring back suitcase full of sabzi and not clothes or chips, etc.
That's brilliant.
So we now, because you mentioned a bunch of times, but the book, we of course talk about the book. We start from Katak Patak, because biting the book, for people who are listening, of course, the link to buy the book biting is in the description, so please go and click, and then you will go to different links for that there. But we want to know about Katak Patak, because this is a new word for me as well. I've never heard Katak Patak. Also because
really,
oh
wow.
I know like one of my friends used to call chutupudu. So like a chutupudu, a chatarpudu. So chatarpudu I have heard, chutupudu I have heard, knickknacks I have heard, but Katak Patak translates to biting. So what is Katak Patak for people who don't understand what chatarpudu is?
I've never heard those ones. Knickknacks, by the way, is just like little things. Like my daughter's room is full of knickknacks, like little things that she doesn't necessarily need. But yeah, so Katak means small, and Batak means bite. So Katak Batak, small bites. That's a very common phrase among Gujaratis, I would say. There's an Instagram feed called Guju Memes, actually, where I saw it and I was like, yes, this Katak Batak, that's exactly what I eat almost every day. So I suppose in my family we don't say Katak Batak. We've always said biting. Chalo apre biting kare. Like, if somebody comes to house, hello, apre biting kare. Sometimes they say biting. Like my Kishore mama will say, biting karwa jao che. Like that. Sometimes it's shortened, but it's almost always long and drawn out, like biting.
Okay.
Mom will always say biting, like very fast. My socks auntie there, she'll always say biting. So yeah, it just basically, I think it's my family. And I did a lot of research in this, actually. I remember when I was thinking about the title for the book, I was like, should I call it Katak Batak or should I call it biting? Maybe everybody says biting. And so I went out on Instagram and I was like, guys, what do you call like Katak Batak or small bites? Do you use that? Do you use something else? And I think it is just mostly my family, from the very small research sample that I had. But so I guess the reason for writing this book was because I think there is this ethos that has been ingrained in me. And I don't know if it's an immigrant way of thinking or an Indian way of thinking or a Gujarati way of thinking. But there is this, don't waste anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. Don't waste anything. Don't waste your time. Don't waste food. Don't waste resources, anything. How many people do you know who mend their clothes now? They don't anymore. They just, something has a hole in it. That's it. They chuck it away. And there's, a big kind of movement among my daughter's generation of buying and either mending or buying secondhand because the hole is cool or whatever. So I think the sense of waste is really important. And I remember vividly the conversation between my mother and my husband when my mother moved in for about 12 weeks after my eldest daughter was born, and she used to cook for me every day. And at the end of the day, there would always be these little bowls of food left. And she would be putting them, she'd put them in the fridge. And we only have a small fridge. We have an under the counter fridge, not one of these big American things, right? Just a very small fridge. And my husband must have gone to get something in there and he couldn't find anything because there's all these little bowls of food. And it's like, oh my God, for God's sake, why are there all these little bowls of food? Why can't you just throw it away? And I remember my mother looking at him going, what do you mean throw food away? You can't throw food away. That's like such a huge sin. So that, she kind of started to explain to him, well, this little batata nushak today can make batata parota tomorrow. Or this little bit of dal today, you can put some more water in it. I can make dokri and tomorrow it's dal dokri. So that's the ethos that I've grown up with. And he never had even contemplated that. And I thought, well, actually, I want to write that down. And that's why I suppose the book has base recipes. So yes, it has, shak recipes and ideas for shak. But also I think what I hope is I've given people ideas of how you can use that, even if you've got a small bowl for 2 or 3 tablespoons the following day. And not just in a Gujarati way, right, into parota or into another Gujarati dish, but the way I eat now is influenced by my travels, by living with my husband for over 25 years, for cooking for my kids, for cooking because I have to work and I haven't got all day to prep a meal. So, one of my favorite Katak Bataks is, and actually we made shak yesterday, so I might go and have this now after breakfast, it's just batata nushak, just with a little bit of rasol, and then you put like a poached egg or a fried egg on top, a little bit of green chili chutney on top, and then just some peanuts. That's like a perfect size biting for one person. So hopefully there's lots of ideas like that in there, as well as traditional Gujarati Katak Batak or biting ideas like muthia or dokra or khichdi. So obsessed with khichdi. So that really is the ethos of the book, is kind of fundamental base recipes on how I learned to cook. And, I'm not saying that the recipes in this book are pure Gujarati. They're just the way I was taught to cook. And they're recipes that I think have evolved to suit the way that I live today. So like dal, mom would spend all weekend making dal. First from taking the oily tur dal and then picking out the stones and then washing it for like an hour, leaving it to soak and then pressure cooking it and then I don't have time for that. I have a full-time job and 2 kids, and I have a gym habit, yoga habit, gardening habit. I want time to do those things. So I don't make dal like that. I have the essence of what she taught me, but I don't make it in the same way. So I hope that the recipes in the book are an insight into Gujarati food, the way that I cook today, the way that I eat today, as well as some traditional things like dokra that I have tried to simplify. So dokra is a good example. When my mum taught me how to make dokra, because I was craving it when I was pregnant with my eldest, she came around and there's all these vata, right? There's like, bowl of this, ooh, la, la, la. And the process was just so complex. I never made it. I was like, Mom, I can't remember this. It's just like, why do you need all these bowls? You have to do this and this and this. oh my God, it did my head
Yeah.
in, and I never made it. And I love dokra, and my mum makes the best dokra in the world. So I was like, okay. And then when I was on maternity leave, I was like, I'm going to simplify the shit out of this recipe because it does not need to be this hard. I want to be able to eat dokra in 30 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I've tried to do in the book as well. So that's one thing. Now, coming back to what you were saying about Gujaratis and sweet tooth, yes, excessively so. Every single sweet thing that I grew up with was so sweet. I can't eat it now. It's just too much.
Right.
So I've toned down the sugar in all of the recipes in my book so that they're to my taste, which is sweet enough, I think.
I mean, this could be a blasphemy already, but the only thing that I have tried a lot of Gujarati food, beverages and all, but the only thing that I did not like was the Gujarati tea.
Oh,
It was a lot of spices. It was literally like killing my palate because the masalas, the spices would just stick to your tongue. So yeah, that was the only thing which was not sweet. Otherwise,
that's
everything
so
is sweet. But
funny.
this was, I don't
Yeah,
like
that's
that
so funny because
Gujarati
I
tea.
had that experience in Bombay, right? So
Yeah.
I was over for work.
Yeah,
in
mine was
20
also in Bombay. Mine was also in
Yeah,
Bombay.
that's so
Yeah.
in Santa Cruz or somewhere, right?
Yes.
And yeah, so I was in Bombay and I did this tour first thing in the morning, and they took us to where they do the newspapers outside the station. And I had the chai, and I was like, oh my God, I can't drink this. It's too strong for me. But yeah, you're right. I think that our masala can be really, really spicy. I don't do that in my book, and I don't use a masala either. I use like whole spices or freshly grated ginger or whatever. I don't like having spice mixes. I'd rather just do it as I go along.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. My dad makes really karak chai, and I can't drink it.
I don't have any problem with kadak, but I have problem with too much spices. It's like you're making a mutton korma or something because most of the same spices goes in your teeth. I'm like, yeah, that's not me. But so you talked about the book and your ethos and idea why you were writing the book, but also I want to understand one thing that in the modern times, or actually two questions as I'm speaking. I'm also thinking one. You came on the show in 2011 and your book came in 2022. Is this some kind of numerology you're playing up with?
No.
211, something will come in 33 now. So that's my first question. Second is, when you are now picking up a book, right, from the market, because your book also has bits of history, bits of your like personality in the book, anecdotes. There's of course recipe and all that. So when you're picking the book, what exactly you're looking at in a recipe or in a cookbook or a food book?
Okay, so question number one. I've had an idea for a book in my head for a long time, and I wanted to write a book. I wanted to write down something, and I didn't really know what it was. And then I developed an idea, which is still brewing, actually. So I'm not going to share it because it's not quite brewed yet. But I think that it's very difficult in the UK to find a publisher who understands regionality of Indian food. And back then, I don't think that you had that here on the bookshelf. I think that there were a lot of Indian books that were by some of the amazing chefs that we have over here, Atul Kochar, Vivek Singh, Cyrus Todiwala. I have Cyrus's book, Bombay, which is one of my favorite books. There were a lot of books by chefs, inspired by their restaurants. I think there were a lot of foods by folks that you see on TV, like Anjuman, and used to see on TV a lot, and she's written some fabulous books. But they were all, for me, quite generic food, or food, Indian food that people in this country would know. And regionality, representation of Indian regionality in books, I think is only a very, very recent thing. And I think one of the first people was probably, Asma Khan from Darjeeling Express, and she wrote her book. And It was very typically karakakana. It was typically kind of what people went to her restaurant to eat, and her food is fantastic, and it's represented in that book very, very well. And then, you know, you had folks like Romy Gill, who have written the Himalayan Trail, which is again another really beautiful region of India. So we're slowly starting to see that now. So I felt like there was space. I don't know of any Gujarati cookbooks in the UK. You know, I haven't seen anything. I think there was a book written by the folks that run Bobby's restaurant in Leicester, which is a really wonderful restaurant of different Gujarati foods, and they have a book, but it's a book for their restaurant. I don't think that you can buy it unless you're at their restaurant. So it was difficult to pitch the idea, frankly. You know, every publisher that I reached out to was, oh, it's another vegetarian cookbook. You know, and it's like, oh, we don't need another vegetarian cookbook because we've got a fantastic one from Madhuji, or we've got a, you know, this one on from Anjum. So I suppose this really was a chapter in the book that I wanted to write. And I was really lucky because I'm part of the Guild of Food Writers. And as lockdown hit, I was doing less travel for my work at KPMG. And they always used to ask me every year, hey, would you like to, you know, be one of the judges for our awards? And this particular year, I said yes. I thought, you know what, I'm not traveling. I've got the time. Let me do this. I've never done it before. And I gave it a go. So the category that I was judging, I got some amazing books. And there was one book in particular, which was one of my favorites from the publisher who published my book. So after the awards was over, I reached out to them and said, hey, I love your books. You know, you published some wonderful books about markets. I would really love to work with you. And they'd also published Brick Lane by Dina, which was like a Bengali cookbook as well. So, you know, we had a few conversations. We you know, came up with a few ideas, and then that's really where it came from. So I think I was lucky to find somebody that believed in the idea and was willing to take a bet on a regional Indian cookbook, which does not exist on the shelves here. So that's question number one. And then question number two, what do I look for in a book? I mean, I buy a book and I read it cover to cover like a novel. That I really enjoy. I love the stories. I love learning about somebody through the words on the page. And my children always say to me, you know, Mama, it's just a recipe book. I'm like, no, this is somebody's heart, soul, life that has come through these pages. And yes, they manifest themselves into a recipe, but there's just so much of a person that, and you almost feel like you get to know that person. Like after, you know, Bombay by Cyrus is a really good example. I read that book cover to cover and I felt like I knew him. Like I felt like I could sit down with him and have a cup of tea because, you know, that's what came through. So that's really what I look for in a book. From a business perspective, when I had my cafes, that was not what I look for. I have so many books that are, you know, 100 muffin recipes, 100 tray bake recipes. I just need something quick that I can get for inspiration. But yeah, predominantly, I love the storytelling.
Right. So in that, what would be, let's say, a top 3 books which you most often refer to, apart from your own book? What would be 3 books? And it could range from storytelling to most recipes.
Yeah, so one of my favorite books is Food of Morocco by Paula Wolfert. And it's about this thick, you know, it's beautiful. And it must have taken her years to research and write it. But what I love about the book is that it's an encyclopedia of food in Morocco. It really is. And, you know, she talks about the history, but each chapter is just so full of richness about the region or the village or the people that she's met along the way. And actually, we used the book to plan our holiday in Morocco. Because we, you know, I read the book cover to cover and I bookmarked what I wanted to eat. And so we were like, okay, well, she went to this village to eat that, so let's go there. So that's one of my all-time favorite books. Similarly, I love the regional Italian cookbooks by Katie and Giancarlo Caldesi. They've written books on Sicily, Venice, the Amalfi Coast. I think I have them all because, again, they are such an education really of the country and the region, as well as an education into the food of that region and what makes it different. And then I suppose one of my other food books, a favorite food book, is by Jenny Linford, who's one of my friends. She lives just up the road actually, and she wrote a book called The Missing Ingredient. And again, that's it's not a recipe book, but it's a very thought-provoking book about that missing ingredient. And I'm not going to give it away by telling you what that missing ingredient is. You guys should just go and buy the book. It's amazing.
Buy the book.
So yeah.
Awesome. The secret ingredient is love. The missing ingredient we don't know. Pick up the book. Awesome. And on that note, we are towards the end. So as always, the tradition is that we talk about the over, under, and favorite food. In your case, we will talk about the Gujarati cuisine. So let's start from the favorite. Right? What's your absolute? We talk about undiyo, we talk about dhokla. So none of those. We talk about dal dhokli as well. So we're none of those. Something beyond that.
Okay, so overrated, I would say mishtan, right? I'm not saying that Gujarati mishtan is not very nice, but I'm just saying get over yourself with this whole obsession with Gujaratis and sweet food and go try something else, right?
Sure.
Mishtan farsan, I think, is a little bit overrated in terms of Gujarati food. It's great, but overrated. Underrated, mutia, right? You say I'm not allowed to talk about dhokla. I would say mutia then is underrated, because I mean, what a brilliant recipe for using up bits and pieces in your fridge with just a few ingredients, some garlic if you like it, some ginger if you like it, and then you mash it all together, steam it, and it's done. I think it's so underrated, and it freezes really well. You can have it steamed just with some tel and some chili powder, or you can vagar it up with some coconut and stuff and have it more substantial with yogurt, or you can make it kadhi and put the mutia in the kadhi and have like rasya mutia. This is the best. I think that's everybody should go and make mutia. Favorite food, oh my god, it's too hard.
You have to pick one.
I would say Shrikand.
But that's mystery.
Yeah, I know, right? It is, but I'm obsessed with Shrikand. So like I had Shrikand for my wedding feast. I mean, I'm marrying a Doryo. I can have whatever I want for my wedding feast. I remember my mom saying, Shrikand? You can't have Shrikand. I'm like, why, Mom? I'm marrying a Doryo. Nobody cares. So she's like, okay, fine. So I had the best Shrikand, and my DFA makes the best Shrikand, but oh my god, it's a process with the newspapers and leaving the yogurt to strain off for days. I don't have time for that. Now when I crave chicken, I just go and get labne from the amazing Turkish shop that's like 10 minutes walk from me, and I fatafat chicken. It's in the book. So, and then whenever we go anywhere, I like to a wedding, my daughters know now that even if they don't want chicken on their thali, they get chicken because mummy's going to eat it.
Good.
That's the rule.
How it should be. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're like, and they'll stand there in front of, the guy giving out the chicken. They'll go, no. And I'm like, what? What did you say? You get the spoonful, you get another spoonful. Mama's going to eat that.
Exactly.
So yeah, chicken. I am obsessed with it. It's just wonderful.
I remember again during the MasterChef season, we went to Anand, which is where the title sponsor of MasterChef, Amul, their main office or the factory is, and close to our hotel there were two Shrikhand Bhandar shops right at the corners, right? And I kid you not, they had like around 20-25 kinds of Shrikhand. I was staying there for 2 to 3 days, and I and the whole crew was staying for 2 to 3 days, and I tried almost all of them. Of course, the good old classic is like an all-time favorite, but it just was so interesting to see the range of Shrikhand that Gujarat can offer. So yeah, it's one of my favorite as well. Of course, after a while, I'm like, maybe just 4 or 5 spoons. Maybe I don't need to finish the whole jar of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't have that. Then I would finish the whole jar.
No, I mostly don't have that spoon, but at times, I'm just saying at times. Mostly, I love my sweet. I love my sugar. people call it like they have sweet tooth. I call myself as I have sweet denture. I just don't have sweet, I have the whole denture. Um, so, because you mentioned about dhokla earlier in this episode, I used to be the resident guy who would give tips on how to make things better. Because you talked about quick, better dhokla. So, what would be the one or two tips that you would give people before we shut shops here? How to make the best dhokla ever?
So go and hunt out Eno, right? I tried so many recipes because I was like, my mum would make it with Eno, and I'm like, Mum, nobody knows where to find Eno in England. This is England. Like, where are they going to go and buy Eno? I need to know a different one. I tried so many recipes with bicarbonate and blah blah blah. Just go to an Indian grocer. Do yourself a favor. Just go to Ealing Road in Wembley or somewhere in Leicester and find the Eno, because it just makes it so beautifully light and fluffy. That's the first thing. Second thing, I make my dhokla with soji, semolina.
Okay. Oh, nice.
And I know a lot of people do like chana a lot, but I really like the texture of coarse semolina, because I think it just, aerates it a little bit and it makes it a bit less dense and much more fluffy. So those would be my two things. Forget the chana a lot. Go make dhokla with semolina.
Nice. So semolina and use Eno. I think Eno a lot of people use in India in general.
Over here,
semolina.
no. We literally had to put a picture of it in the book to make sure that people knew what they were looking for.
I think every household here that I always have like 2 boxes of Eno.
Yes, absolutely.
Because you're making dhokla and then you will add Eno, or you're just feeling acidic, so you will just pop in one. So yeah. On that, thank you very much, Urvashi. We are going to now shut this shop of our Gujarati snack or biting. But before we go, is there any interesting project that you're currently working on apart from that, the book that's brewing in your head? Any other thing that you're working on?
Yes, I'm working on launching my podcast, which is going to be called Biting. Yeah, and you'll have to come on my podcast. So yeah, that's the next thing. That's the next thing for me, I think. My day job is a little bit busy at the moment, so it's a little bit delayed. But I'm looking forward to that, hopefully launching in the next couple of months.
Lovely. We will have one more food podcast, and I'm excited about that as well, because why not? And where can people find you on social media, possible?
On social media, so people can find me in my book, and they can find me on social media, just at Urvashi Roe on Twitter and at Urvashi Roe on Instagram. I'm a little bit obsessed with Instagram, I must admit. I joined Instagram for the beautiful photography, and I am completely old school. And I do the odd reel. I don't know about you, but like I do the odd reel now and then. And I have this series on my reels, which is called Gujarati Gems, because, coming back to what we were talking about earlier, I'm trying to educate folks on where they can go for their Gujarati fix, for either, a typical Gujarati shop or a typical Gujarati dish. So yeah, come find me on Instagram.
I absolutely love your photographs, by the way, on Instagram. The one that you put up today on tea is just beautiful.
I have to admit, that is not my photo. That's my beautiful, beautiful friend, Matt Inwood, who did the photography for the book. So a huge credit to Matt, because the photos in the book are absolutely beautiful. Yeah,
it's just visual treat. It's just lovely. I'm assuming you love tea, and that's where the tea photo comes in. And
I do love tea. I love tea.
Yeah, I like the fact that you mentioned you like to educate people. So your caption tells us that it's not just like, here's a tea and then end of the story, but you've got the whole narrative around it. I do the same thing. I write really long captions. So I hope people actually read those captions, because I do. So for everybody else who is listening, please go and read caption, because people, please understand, we're not using ChatGPT to put up the captions. We literally are writing.
It takes me ages to write those captions as well. I must admit, I write them in the gym when I'm doing my weights workouts, because I have to pause for like 2 minutes or whatever. I'm like, it takes me a good long workout to write those captions. So yes, people go and read them.
Yes, it's not ChatGPT, it's our minute. But yeah, on that, thank you, Urvashi. On this happy Gujarati note, hum kalte hain dukaan band.